sports, we lost the legend that is David Webster recently. We thought we'd do a little video on behalf of all the strength people in the world. David was a huge inspiration to us all, one of the founders of strength in the world, and his legacy will live on for the rest of time. As long as we keep competing, keep doing our own thing, we hope that one day we can be half as good as David was. To all his family and friends, we send our deep condolences. But please live on and be happy knowing that David left such a huge legacy and was such an inspirational one.
Oh man, what can I say about Dave Webster? An absolute legend in the world of strength. Someone so heavily involved, not just in strongman, but Highland Games, weightlifting, all aspects of strength. And I think any modern strongman has a huge amount to thank David for. He did so much in terms of promoting the sports. He was a big advocate of all different strength sports. And without him, World's Strongest Man would never have got to the level that it did. I think myself and every single person that does strongman these days needs to know who David is. He'll be hugely missed in the sport, and you know, such a huge inspiration to myself and so many people.
What can I say about David? For me, he's an absolute legend, one of the founders of the strongman sport, but more than that, a gentleman and somebody dedicated pretty much his whole life to the world of strength. Highland Games, strongman, powerlifting and everything. So I think we are a lot of people that owe him a big thank you. For me, he's also the voice of strongman. When I was a kid watching my heroes, Bill Kazmaier and Jon Paul Sigmarsson fighting, I've always done to the voice of David Webster. So for me it was a big thing when I finally got to the World's Strongest Man myself and got to meet him. I've spent a lot of time together with David and Douglas and these guys, and for me, when I look back my memory lane, I'm walking behind David and the guys in on a field somewhere behind a castle in Scotland, feeling the nervous feeling in the chest building up. It was always David Webster running the paperwork and the mic, and Douglas running the game. And for me, that was probably the greatest time of the whole thing. Something I really enjoyed.
We remember with a smile and a full heart the legend, the Magnus extraordinaire, David P Webster, whose life and times influenced generations worldwide throughout his work and boundless energy as a sports historian, author, promoter, accomplished administrator, and most importantly, colleague and friend. It was an honor to publish the world history of Highland Games by Lewith Press of Edinburgh with David. He was so proud of this book. And to travel the world photographing the sport that was so dear to his heart. He personally showed me every manhood stone in Scotland and beyond. We also smile when we remember David learning to make his own pizza in my kitchen with my son Matthew. Matthew, Jamie Barr, Bruce and Stephen Aiken taking David on many adventures, one of which was to Niagara Falls, where, true to form, David took off. After hours of looking, they saw him waving from the Maid of the Mist, going under the falls. David's friends at the Fergus and Maxville festivals in Canada and beyond fondly remember his professionalism, depth of knowledge, and humor on and off the field. Warren Trask and Steve Clark often the butt of many jokes. Neil Lowry, Christoph Juan, Anthony Lordy, Kevin Fast, Dirk Bishop, Greg Hadley, Alistair Gunn from across the water, and hundreds more remember David so fondly. Father Douglas MacDonald, Christoph Wandon, and myself working with David to create a Canadian-Scottish Athletic Federation, with David as a mentor and supporter. David survived driving through a massive tornado in Elora and Fergus, a day on the beach in his kilt, he and Danny Markovic capturing a violent criminal. David could pack more into 24 hours than anyone I have ever met. David, your knowledge and charm is irreplaceable. You were a legend when amongst us and will remain so in our hearts forever. To a life well lived. We love you, David.
I wanted to take a few minutes to speak about something that's very important to me, a person that really changed my mind about the importance of history, of the iron game, how to show proper respect for strength and great feats of strength. The gentleman I'm referring to is David Webster. over five generations, he's been doing wonderful work and writing in books and supporting in every way he could coming to the United States during the Arnold Strongman, and many things such as his book Sons of Samson inspired me years back to absolutely engulf, as you see in the background, all the things that are of iron. David is a wonderful person. I was blessed with meeting him, working with him shoulder to shoulder. He never shirked a duty. He was always a real gentleman, always came in his regalia to any of the events, inspired everyone, worked with everyone. My heart is sad to have missed him, but I know I'll run into him again, hopefully in the gates of iron up in heaven. He'll be there to help out again. I miss you, David. Thank you.
Hi, I want to celebrate with you the life of David Webster. As we all know, David was a legend in the iron game world, in the strength and conditioning world, and a pioneer. But David, as we all know, was also so kind and so humble. So many times when I would see him backstage at the Arnold, or having dinner with Todd, or many times on the Highland Games field as I was an athlete, especially in my beginning of my career, David always showed me respect and interest. More than anything, it was the interest that he had in all the athletes and making sure their well-being was taken care of and that they were inspired to do their best. And as a young pup coming up in the strength world, I didn't necessarily deserve that, nor was it Dave's job to give that to me, but he always did. He always asked what he could do. He always asked about my father. He always spent time with me as a young athlete to make sure that I saw the richness in the sport and of the iron game. And that's something I'll never forget, and I will never take for granted, that I had a chance, a brief chance for maybe a decade or so, to brush with true greatness and a legend of the iron game. David, we will miss you. I'm glad we were able to drink some scotch together on a number of occasions and share space and time. It was a wonderful few moments of my life, and you will always be remembered and you will be missed. Love you, David.
David Webster, for me, is what I consider the epitome of strength sports. He was a great person, and great people, they're not just great. Great people have gone on to work so hard to become who they are and to become a great person. I personally celebrate his dedication to having the right standards and high standards for strength sports. Not only Highland Games, but also Strongman, also bodybuilding, and many other strength sports. David Webster always met everyone he met with a infectious smile and a firm handshake. When I very first met him, he was very intrigued to learn more about the sport of the amateur strongman circuit here in America. And he always seemed to tune in to whatever I had to say to him. And the moral values that he held within strength sports is what will be remembered most about him. His moral values, I feel as though that resulted in him having such a fulfilled life. And he influenced so many people with his high morals and his high values and high standards that he had. I want to thank David Webster for what he influenced me with, and he had such a good life, and he was such a great example to us all.
Back in 2002, I wanted to volunteer for the Arnold Strongman Classic, so I made a call to Mr. Lorimer and explained to him that, hey, could I volunteer? And he said, well, I'll have Todd give you a call. So Terry called and he said, I heard you want to volunteer. And I said, yeah. I said, I'm a local guy, maybe you can help out. And he said, well, my wife Jan and I will be directing the event and David Webster will be helping. And I was like, wow, this is great. I'll get to meet Terry, and I'll get to meet Jan, and I'll get to meet David Webster, and I'll get to meet all the awesome competitors and everybody that's involved with the event. It was amazing. So what was really cool is that I got a couple other guys to help me. And I said, guys, we need to make sure we get the gear on stage and off stage and all this and get it and bring it up. And so when we got there, David made an effort immediately to come up to us and just say, hey, I'm David Webster. Nice to meet you. And I'm like, we know who you are. I said, this is amazing. We've seen you on TV, on the World's Strongest Man competition, just doing all the officiating and all the cool stuff that you do, and all the books that you've written, and all the articles. Everything's just amazing. So it was a thrill to work with David. But what's really cool is that he didn't have to come up to us and introduce himself like that. So that was David. He was really so just amazing person. And then also he made like effort during the competition to come to us and say, hey, great job, that sort of thing. And then we'd love to listen, we'd love to learn from David. So when he spoke, we just shut up, because we knew he had so much experience. He would say, well, you can do this, you can make the stone like this, or you can design a log like this, or, I would ask him questions, and he would always be so willing to answer those questions. So yeah, it was just great, all the knowledge he had, and what he did for all the strength sports, what he did for the Highland Games, and for weightlifting, and for strongman, and even for bodybuilding. He made such a difference. So what we see today, a lot of that came from David. So I don't know, it's just really cool, because I had the opportunity to meet him and to work with him, and I'm very fortunate, blessed to do that. So yeah, I could go on and on, get a little long-winded, but I guess I'll just sign off by saying rest in peace, David, and keep the bar loaded in heaven, and hopefully one of these days we'll get to meet again.
Kaz here, in a few words about David Webster, the legend. What an amazing man. First time I met him, he invited myself, Jan Todd, and Terry Todd over to Scotland for some Highland Games and some fun with the stones. First games were at Braemar. Caber toss was tough. Davey ran behind and judged and watched Capes throw a perfect 12. He got behind me. He didn't have to go very far. After 3 steps, I flipped it and went 12:05. Tough call. Tough judge. Probably one of the best referees there ever was, or ever will be. 50 to 60 years dedicating himself to the Highland Games, to the World's Strongest Man, choosing events, venues, athletes, taking care of everybody and everything all the time in a very selfless manner. I, on the other hand, was a little bit selfish. I wanted records. So did everybody else. Amish Davidson, Jim McGoldrick, Jeff Capes. All these guys were phenomenal. Bill Anderson, Grant Anderson. I missed the era of Ryan Vieira and Francis Brebner, but Davey Webster didn't. He saw all the records, saw all the world championships. He drew energy from each of these guys, but yet every single game's competition, again, selfless, only thinking of others. Tens of thousands of guys competed in front of him, and literally thousands of competitions. In one summer, in the late 80s, I went to 24 competitions. It was just incredible. David was always there, always reffing, emceeing, helping and organize the events. He did a fantastic job. After that visit to Braemar in '79, I broke the world record in the 56. Listening to those pipes was amazing. The smile on David's face when I went over 16 feet for the record was just incredible. He was such an awesome individual, helping others any way, shape, or form that he could. A week later, he organized me to break the world record in the 56 and win a Vauxhall worth 12,000 pounds. If you would have saw the look on his face when he came up to me and said, Bill, I got this put together. We're on the field about to throw. And he said, I'm afraid I have to tell you something. It's some bad news, Bill. You're only allowed one attempt at the world record. I looked at him. I said, that's no problem. It'll only take one. He chose the levels and the heights and worked me up over 16 feet for the new world record. He's done so much for me and for all other athletes. I salute him with a ton of respect. I got a call when he was 90 from his young son, David, who said, Bill, we'd like to surprise my dad and bring you up to the birthday party. There were hundreds of people there. It was an awesome event, and the entrance was truly remarkable. David and I cooked it up where he would say something and made a toast to his dad about his wonderful and awesome life, and all of his contributions, and all the things he did for others. He said, but Dad, you had many successes, but once in a while you made a mistake. As a matter of fact, you made a big mistake, Webster. Dad, as his son introduced me, I walked through the door, and I got to sit with him at his birthday party celebrating his 90th with Jan Todd and other dignitaries and people who had crossed paths with David. Believe me, refs don't make mistakes. David Webster called every lift, every attempt, and everything in his career the way he saw it. Refs are always right. I'm the one that made the mistake. So, when I was there at the birthday party, David said, well, that's about enough of these. I don't know that he was having that much fun. He said, that's 90. I'll see you when I'm 100. You know, what an amazing attitude at 90 years old. That I'll just knock off 10 more. He came pretty darn close. What a spunky guy. What an awesome person who dedicated his life to the betterment of Strongman, Highland Games, and every athlete he came in contact with. David Webster, you're remarkable. I hold no grudges. We love you. Thank you for everything you've done, Sir David Webster.
David Webster, what to say? David Webster was involved with the sport of strongman and Highland Games when I started out. We traveled a lot together. I listened to a lot of his stories. One of my favorite stories was actually a story he told me in the later years. And it was something like this, that he was still chasing women. He just forgot why.
David Webster's one of those guys that I only got to briefly shake hands with, and it's really unfortunate because I wish I got to sit down and have a beer with him. And the guy was 95 years old when he passed. So that's a rich life. But beyond that, the strength world, everything we know in Strongman and Highland Games, it wouldn't be what it is today without his legacy. So I am eternally grateful to David P Webster, and I hope that beyond in Valhalla we get to have that drink and I get to hear about his life stories, because that is a legend. Rest in peace.
Hello everyone, this is a message of our good friend David P Webster, OBE. Now, I first met David back in 2015, then again in 2016 when we filmed Stoneland, and ever since then we became very good friends. We would correspond quite often through email, and David would always have a little joke to tell at the end of every single email, which would always cheer me up. And then after a little while I would drive down from Elgin, take a 4-hour journey down to see David down in Glasgow. We would spend the afternoon together, first going to a restaurant for a little meal, and then we'd go back to his house and talk for hours and hours on end about strength, the strongman world, Highland Games, strongman, everything that corresponds with that. But not only would he do that, every time I was down there he would always ask me genuinely how I was and how my family was, what my kids were up to and how they were doing. He was always really interested, and for that I thank him a lot. But every time I would go and visit him in Glasgow, he would always come up with new stories from his life I had never heard before. He was such an amazing man, interesting man, but more than anything, he was a very good friend. And someone I do miss dearly a lot. But this video is just to say how great a friend you were, David, and how much everyone misses you, and how much you have changed and inspired a lot of lives out there. Highland Games, Strongman, everything strength related. Even out with strength, you have changed a lot of people's lives for the better, including mine. Now, I will end this video by saying not goodbye, it's never farewell. It's simply, David, I will see you again soon, my friend. Until then, rest easy.
Hi there, my name's Brett Nicol, Dinnie Stone lifter and creator of the Nicol Stones. A lot of tribute to David Webster, who was just sadly lost. Let's say thank you, David, for everything you did in the strength community, stone lifting in general, Highland Games and everything throughout the sport. And the guy that founded Dinnie Stones, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for inviting us to send you a message about David and what we thought of David. Obviously we thought very highly of him. He's had a big influence in the Shanks family over the years, you know, particularly in relation to the Dinnie Stones. He's been a great friend of my dad. In later years he became a great friend of me in my quest with the Stones. So yeah. An incredible man, an incredible loss. We're very, very sorry to hear about his passing, but what a life he led. In relation to how we first met David, do you want to tell?
Yes. I held the British weightlifting records and had 3 judges. When I heard about the Dinnie Stones, I was wondering how I could go about it. Got interested in trying to lift them. And one of the judges knew David, and he gave me David's phone number. And I rang David, and the rest history. He organised the lift and the carry the next year.
Yeah. An incredible man, and he will be sadly missed. Yeah. I mean, all the things that he's done over the years. But I mean, certainly his connection with our family over the years, he's been nothing but a friend to us. Nothing was ever too much trouble. I always used to look forward to go and meet him at his house, and we'd go to the wee cafe and we would have a cup of tea and a couple of wee sweetie buns, and he would just, I would just sit and listen to him for hours, honestly. So to his family and to David, thank you for everything you've done.
Yeah. And thank you very much. Thank you very much to your father, to you, David, because if it hadn't been for him, we would never got involved with the Dinnie Stones.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning. This is Jan Todd here in Austin, Texas, in my home office. And what I'm now going to do are to read the remarks that I made at David Webster's funeral on November 2nd, 2023. Good morning. My friendship with David Webster began in 1979, when Terry and I and Bill Kazmaier went to Scotland for the first time. That friendship has been immensely important to me, and I'd have to say an inspiration, but it's really only partly why I'm here today. I'm also here as a historian, but I feel a little bit like Sisyphus, whom the gods gave the impossible task of trying to roll a large rock uphill that keeps rolling backward, as there's just not enough time to really give David all the credit that he deserves for his impact on the world of strength. Many people might want to argue that the rise of our modern interest in lifting weights and being strong began with the popularity of Arnold Schwarzenegger in the 1970s. Obviously, Arnold played a big role, but his impact came primarily from creating a physique that others tried to emulate, and then by promoting bodybuilding through his books and the founding of the Arnold Classic Bodybuilding Contest, and of course by being a great ambassador for his sport. Please understand, I'm not trying to sell Arnold short here. He did much more than that, of course. But Arnold never put strength first, as David did. What did David actually do? His career began in Aberdeen, where he ran a gym, he became an excellent weightlifter, he began coaching, and he took up strand pulling. But his interest in Scotland's rich history related to strength also soon found him along the River Dee, where he discovered the historic Dinnie stones, and then, of course, began explaining to all of us their cultural importance and how that mattered to Scotland. Though he didn't know it at the time, David launched a new, yet very, very old form of strength competition. The lifting of stones is now celebrated in strongman events around the world, and dozens of strength pilgrims, men and women, travel to the inn at the Petar Bridge each year to test themselves against the Dinnies, again because of David. David also raised the profile of the Highland Games, especially the heavy events, by helping launch contests in other countries, covering the games in various sport and muscle magazines, writing books, and founding the International Federation of Highland Games. He also promoted the first World Highland Games, and he served as an official, promoter, or announcer at hundreds of contests around the world. David was also instrumental in launching the sport known as Strongman, which began as a TV show in the late 1970s, and he helped my husband Terry to create the Arnold Strongman Classic in 2002. And of course, as many of you know who are listening, he served as his head official for many, many years. He was also one of the first to hold a strong woman competition, and some of you may not know that. And he did amazing work in promoting weightlifting and powerlifting in Scotland and the United Kingdom. But the most important thing he did for our modern world of strength was to reconnect us with our paths. It was David's books and magazine articles that gave us a pantheon of heroes and heroines to want to emulate. Arnold was not my role model when I began lifting. It was Katie Sanduina, and I learned about her in large part from David. He also gave us a greater understanding of the importance and cultural significance of pursuing strength. His writings helped people understand that lifting was not a sport done by muscleheads. Rather, it was one of the oldest forms of sport and had a fascinating international history. He helped us find meaning in our strength rituals, no matter the sport, and understand that strength is part of our cultural identity. In simple terms, his work and his life demonstrated that strength matters. And I believe that too. The American playwright Thornton Wilder once wrote that the highest tribute to the dead is not grief, but gratitude. And so I say, thank you, David, for all that you did in promoting strength and for how your work changed the lives of so many of us in this room and now online listening to these words. It is a cliche, of course, but we are all of us, very much in your debt. And so thank you. Please know we will never forget you, and may you now rest in peace. Farewell.
This video is for David, just to take a few minutes to remember who he was as a person, what he meant to us and our family. We have so many wonderful memories with him in New Hampshire and throughout the world that were just so special. We feel very blessed to have had him part of our lives with all the memories that we share with him, and he will be forever missed.
We could say a lot of things about David Webster, but I think the main thing we can say is that he was our friend. He is our friend. Before every Highland Games, he would say, "Cold Malefatsu," which means 1,000 welcomes. And what we didn't know is that he would welcome himself into our hearts 1,000 times. We miss you, David.
David P Webster, OBE, Officer of the Order of the British Empire. Awarded to him by Queen Elizabeth. It's said that he was one of the few people to be able to make the Queen laugh in public. That would be David. What can I say? We met 30 plus years ago, became close friends, partners in the World Championships, and worked many games together over the years. He introduced me to lots of people, made it possible for me to experience things in the Highland Games world and the strongman world that I would have never been able to do. Stayed at my house after Pleasanton. Great memories. After dinner, we'd have a biscuit and tea and maybe a small nip. And Late night chats, numerous stories. David had a fantastic memory. We traveled together in Scotland, Canada. Again, I'll just cherish those memories. I'll miss him greatly. Rest in peace, my dear friend.
I've known David since '98. I met him in an antique store in downtown Pleasanton on the Friday before the game. We probably talked about a half an hour that day. I really got along with David. We hit it off, and every time I saw him, we had great conversation. I really enjoyed his company. I really enjoyed his stories. He had a lot to say. Very prolific writer in the strength world, collector, and he was always on a quest looking for things that were strength related, and he usually find stuff. I have a great deal of respect for the man. He did a lot of stuff. He did a lot of good things for the Highland community and the strength world. Finding the Dinnie stones, huge stuff. I have a couple of stories I'd like to tell you. Some are funny. And one of them was in 2014, I met David at the Arnold, and we kind of hung out that weekend with Steve and a few other people. But we were walking around the expo, and we bumped into Bill Kazmaier. And Bill had been injured and was wearing a leg brace, and he had recently moved up to Alaska. And so, of course, David asked him what had happened, and Bill said that he had gotten into a fight with a grizzly bear and kicked its ass. Well, it's Bill Kazmaier. That could have very well been possible. And it's a funny story, and we know it's not, true, but it was a good story. Later on, we went by a YouTuber booth with Rich Piana, big celebrity in the YouTube thing, now deceased, but very big guy. David saw him and just looked at me and goes, "Kel, it's just not right. He's too big." It's like, it was a funny comment because, he was kind of freaky looking. And another story I have about David is from a past chief of the Caledonian Club that I was a member of for a while. And he said that David was basically forced to apologize to the club because he had gotten into altercation with one of the members. I think it was a past chief. And basically the argument was finished by David saying he was going to give the guy a Glasgow kiss. If you know what a Glasgow kiss is, I'm not going to preface it and tell you. You just look it up if you don't know. Anyhow, it was pretty funny. David manned up and did it. I'm sure he probably did it very begrudgingly. But I like David. Didn't have a filter on how he felt about things. I mean, if he felt strongly about something, he'd let you know it. And I appreciate that about David. And I appreciate the friendship that I had with him for 25 years. He was a good guy. I admired him. And he was a big influence to me. And it's influenced other people. He always will influence everybody he meets. That's just the way it is. Thank you.
David Webster will long be fondly remembered as the voice of the Caledonian Club of San Francisco's heavy athletics program from 1984 until 2015. However, David's relationship with the Caledonian Club dates back to 1971. That was when David brought the McVitie's Highland Games to the Polo Grounds in San Francisco. Now at that time, the club's chief, Malcolm Ramsey, was looking to expand the club's heavy athletics program, and David was just the man to help. Thanks to David, Malcolm was able to bring athletes such as Bill Anderson and Grant Anderson from Scotland and the world champion shot putter Brian Oldfield to compete. The crowds just loved the quality of international competition, and David and Malcolm's collaboration was recognised in 1975 when the Caledonian Club's games became home to the United States Championships. At the Sesquicentennial Games in 2015, David relished his role as honorary chieftain, announcing, "Let the games begin," in the traditional manner. In that same year, David, along with champion athlete Bill Anderson, was a worthy co-recipient of the Chiefs Trophy in recognition of his long association with the Caledonian Club's Scottish Games.
This is an honor to talk about David Webster briefly. The first time I met David, I was in the Highland Games for about 2-3 years in the 90s, and I volunteered for Pleasanton as a equipment assistant with my friend Lori Moore. So we worked on the equipment when it broke down, and wasn't throwing good enough to be in the games at that time at Pleasanton, but it was such an honor to meet David. I mean, Steve had told me a lot of things about him, and I've heard all kinds of things about him, and he was the announcer that they would bring over, and he would announce for the games, and it was just really cool to watch. But then when I became a thrower and to hear him with his accent say your name when you were throwing, it was just, wow. Now I know I've made it. I was at Pleasanton, I was throwing, and David Webster was talking and saying my name on the microphone. And then as I became a judge, it was just an honor to have him come by and talk to me, and I just, he was a good man. He was a nice man, a very knowledgeable man. I bought a few of his books, and he signed them for me, and through the years. And I was sad when he couldn't come back and announce anymore. It just was you missed something with him when he was at the games and announcing for us. And it was an honor to attend functions with him and talk to him and listen to his stories and listen to all his knowledge that he had. And I just felt honored to be around him. And he slowly will be missed, or he is missed. And we are, those who knew him and those who were his friends knew him really well, and his family. I'm sorry for your loss, and he did great things for Highland athletics and for strongman competitions around the world. So I lift a cup to you, David. It was an honor to know you.
Actually, the first time I met David was at my very first Highland Games in Pleasanton. I had no idea what I was doing, and I wasn't sure that I belonged there at all. As it turns out, the day went pretty much okay, and as my career continued, David was with me for a lot of the milestones in my journey. He was with me when I was first invited to compete abroad. He was with me when I was invited to compete at Fergus, and of course many return trips back to Pleasanton. And actually the last time I got the chance to hang out with David was at Pleasanton, and that day was really special for me because he in particular was really excited to show me where he had documented some of my career highlights in the book that he had recently completed. And for me, it was his way of telling me that not only did I belong in the community, but that I had contributed in a positive way that needed to be noted in the history of Highland Games. And for me, knowing where I started from, that was a really incredible honor. And, I think everybody who knew David knows his incredible passion for the Highland Games and his pursuit of his passion. That was lifelong and with full gusto. And to me, that's the definition of a life well lived. And I hope, or I know, that those that really got the chance to know him and see him pursue his passion can take that as a great inspiration in their own lives. And so, thank you, David, for everything. I love you.
I met David first, 1989 in Scotland, as he and Douglas invited me for my first Highland Games. And after that, I competed for him in many, many games. And I'm very grateful for everything he did for me. And he was a great sport, fun to be with, lots of humor. Called me the Iceman, said I lived in an igloo, and many, many other jokes. He'll be missed, and I want to say, David, Skål, my friend. Bye-bye.
Hello. Just want to share a few words about my old friend, David Webster. David and I first met 1984, which was my first serious year training and competing in the Highland Games. We really started to develop a lifelong friendship the next year, 1985, when I made my first trip to Scotland and got to spend a great deal of time with David. One of my most memorable highlights of my career was looking forward each year a couple of times to get to spend time with my old friend David. Really was something that I cherished and always looked forward to. And after retirement, I got to renew that friendship each year at the Caledonian Club of San Francisco Highland Games in Pleasanton, California. Looked forward to that. Always made a special effort to be there, to spend time with David. David, I love you. I miss you. I'll always be grateful for our friendship. And you live on in my heart. Love you, David.
Hi, I'm Alistair Gunn from Halkirk, Scotland, and I'm here to say a few words about Dave Webster, who we sadly lost this year. I first met Dave in 1984 when he was running the Scottish under-25 Scottish Championships for heavy events. Him and Doug Edmonds, both were sort of in partnership running these games, so that was the first time I met Dave. And then later on, about 3 years later, I met him again in California. He was commentating out in the Santa Rosa Highland Games, and I got invited out to compete against some of the best in the world. It was Jeff Capes, Mark Higgins, Jim McGoldrick, Dan Markovic, Keith Tice. So it was a big invite for me when I was, I suppose I was just 24 years old. Anyway, after that, Dave got me invited out to the Bicentennial Games in Australia in Wentworth Park in 1987, or it was New Year's Day 1988 we had it. That was where we met Jim McGoldrick and Joe Quigley. We competed out there, and Bill Anderson's last games of his life, I suppose. He was 50 years old and he did very good. Anyway, we got to know each other a lot better after that, because Dave was, we're sitting on a plane for 25 hours, sitting speaking and laughing and joking and things like that, so I got to know Dave quite well. So after that, obviously I was throwing a lot better then as I was getting older, and Dave got me invited to a few other games, and some of his world championships. I think I went to about 12 of his world championships, maybe a bit more. But eventually in 1995, I managed to win it, which well, I was quite happy about, but I don't think Francis Brennan was very happy, and George, they were second and third. But anyway, there was only a point between the three of us. So after that, Dave, he was a great commentator, a great announcer, and a prolific writer. I mean, I didn't know very much about the stones, the strength of that, but he set me straight on them. So it was amazing how he found the Donald Denny stones. He was telling me the story about that. Went down to the river and found them. So anyway, after that, Dave, who we managed to get him to take his World Championship up to Halkirk in Scotland in 2016. It was, seems that long ago now, 2016 we had the World Championships in Halkirk and Scott Ryder won it. And I think Dave, he was commentating a bit, not much, just a little here and there. And it's a great memory he's got. I don't know how he manages, you know, he remembers a real lot of stuff, well, most of the time anyway, you know, we can say. I'll forgive him a few bits and pieces, but he tells jokes and everything. So anyway, 2016 was the last time I seen Dave, and missed him a lot. His logic and his humour. But anyway, it was a pleasure knowing Dave, and I was thank you very much for everything you did for me, Dave.
When I think about David Webster, all I can think of is just he was Highland Games. He was Highland Games for me, Highland Games for many of us, and I can still hear his voice announcing. You know, it just brings back memories that I'll never ever forget. From the first time I met him in Pleasanton, California, and then many years of world championships, of international championships, and just hearing his voice, and I can still hear it. And I'll never forget it. I have videos that I go back and listen to, and I can hear his voice, and I can hear him saying my name, and I can hear him saying these other guys' names. And it just, what an experience we were lucky enough to be a part of. And then I watch old videos of 30 years from when I started, and how much he did for the games. We're so indebted to his family for all they sacrificed to let Dave do this. We're indebted to David Webster for just being Highland Games, because he traveled the world. He gave his life to making the games better for his country, for the athletes, and he's such a great human being, a high-class character person. He was always respectful. He always had the athlete's best interest at heart. I can still remember when we got to meet Prince Charles and how honored he was and how honored we were. And now, you know, we can all say we've met the king, and a lot of that had to do with Dave Webster. And David, we sure miss you for all that you did for the games and for all that you did for me and my family. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. The world lost a great human being. The Highland Games probably lost their greatest ambassador ever. And we'll never forget you. To his family, thank you guys. And I know that you know, it's hard, but David, you led a great life, and we were so lucky to be a small part of this. And may you rest in peace. And thank you for everything.
Yeah, I was really saddened to hear about the passing of David Webster, but you know, what a full life to celebrate. And that's a man that fell in love with strength and his passion for it, and got to chase it his entire life. And through that pursuit, you know, he opened the doors for me to find something that I got to be great at with the Highland Games. And I know that sport doesn't have the people in it, and doesn't have the audience, and it doesn't have that energy to it without David. Strength community definitely lost one of the unsung heroes, and hearing stories from him in Scotland while we've been over there and at World Championships, I remember, and him sharing stories of him and his brother digging the Denny stones out of the river to put those back on display for everyone. Like, there's so many incredible parts of the strength world that David's got his fingerprint in. And I'm honored to have been able to call him a friend and be able to see the world with him. So, rest in peace, brother. Proud to have known you.
Hearing about the passing of David Webster was tough, you know. You're in a sport like Highland Games. You know, David Webster, he's the man. You know, he's the guy that's done more for this this sport and this community than any single person has. And when I finally got to meet David, it was fun to watch how excited he was to see another Highland Game competition. He loved this sport, and the sport loved him back very, very much. To his family, all his friends, we're all going to miss him sorely, but he's always going to be a part of this community. If it wasn't for David, a lot of us would have never gotten into this sport, and the sport wouldn't have grown like it has. So, you'll be missed, David. You'll be very, very missed. Thank you for everything you've done.
I was fortunate enough to spend the best part of my career in the Highland Games around David. He was a constant factor from the very start right through to when I finished. His voice for me is the voice of the Highland Games. I can think of no other to compare to it, really. His contribution to the games and to strength sports in general is astonishing, and the amount of people that have paid tribute to him is a testimony to that fact. For my part, he gave me my first invite to a World Championships, which was a really inspiring moment for me and something that shaped what I would do for many years to come. And of course, I'm enormously grateful to him and for seeing some potential in me. He was actually the commentator at the first Highland Games I ever did in Scotland, which was Doug Edmonds' games in Glasgow Green. And I'll never forget the first time he introduced me to the crowd. He did somewhat embellish some of my achievements. And afterwards, I did have to say to him, David, come on, you really made me sound a bit better than I really am. And he just smiled and he said, Scott, you should never let facts get in the way of a good introduction. And that was typical of David. He was a great commentator. He had some wonderful lines, tremendous warmth, which I think the crowds loved. And he was so authentic. He was a true gentleman. He always had a kind word, an encouraging word. And of course, he was massively knowledgeable about the whole history of the games and strength sports. But of course, he knew all the current guys as well. He is sorely, sorely missed. And obviously my thoughts are with his family. But what a legacy he leaves behind. And the fact that his name will forever be attached to the Highland Games World Championship trophy, the Webster Cup, I think is a tremendous part of that legacy. And I know that it's something that a lot of people will treasure for the many, many years to come. So thank you, David. Thank you for everything that you did for me personally and to the sport that I was involved in. And rest in peace.
I'm incredibly thankful for what David Webster did for my sport, the Scottish Highland Games. If it wasn't for many of the things he did, I never would have seen it. I never would have experienced it. I never would have been able to travel the world wearing a kilt, throwing heavy stuff, helping provide for my family at the professional level all the way. It was awesome. And I am so thankful for the impact David Webster had.
I just wanted to say how thankful I am that David had such an impact and influence in the strength sports community. Also, how appreciative I am of his involvement in the Scottish Highland Games, one of the best sports on the planet. Without David, I may not have had a chance to become a world champion. My condolences to his family, and you guys are in my thoughts.
You know, David, well, I have so many fond memories of David Webster, and I got to spend a lot of time with Mr. Webster. And there's a lot of memorable experiences and places I've been with him. And I would say some of the things that I really admire about him are, one, how much energy he had for even being later in his life when I met him. I probably met him in his early 70s, and I even remember his 80th birthday party at Pleasanton, California. The energy he had for someone that age, and the memory of the games and of us, and he'd have to remember our stats and what we did, and he was always so impressive and so gracious to the crowd and to us.
And something else that will really stick out to me was how important it was for him to have the integrity as far as having good throwers there, and not just about the show, but making sure the throwers were legitimate and qualified and for the most part well-mannered and gracious themselves. So David did so much for the sport. I don't think any of us would have been where we were at without him. And I was very sorry to hear of his passing, and not only how much he did for the Highland Games, but for weightlifting and certainly for World's Strongest Man. And there's numerous times I remember being in a restaurant or, after a games and just sitting and talking with him and listening to his stories. And, and that's the other thing. He didn't really ever repeat many of his stories. He had so many of them. For somebody of that age, that's very rare. And getting to meet Arnold and knowing Arnold Schwarzenegger and, all the different World's Strongest Men and Bill Kazmaier. He had never acted like he was too good for us, and would always listen to us and appreciate everything we did and wanted to know about our families and where we were from and what we were about. So I just want to, thanks for asking me to do this, and feel very blessed and honored to have known the man.
I'm Adriane Wilson, and David Webster has been a part of my career ever since I started throwing. He was at the first Pleasanton Games I'd ever went to, and he picked up on all the athletes' names. I couldn't believe how sharp he was year after year, still keeping up with all the athletes, where they're from, their talents, and some special facts about everybody. He also supported all the women in the calendar games in Scotland and any of the Doug Edmund games. It was really, really fun to see him just travel all over the world to announce, to support, and to just continue the love for the Highland Games. He'll be sorely missed.
Hey everybody, my name is Tommy de Bruijn. I'm chairman of the Dutch and Belgium Highland Games Association, and I'm here in Scotland now, where we are having the service for David P Webster this afternoon. And because of that, they asked me to say a few words in his honor. I was thinking it's hard to captivate everything you want to say about David in a couple of minutes, but I'll try to do it. What David meant to us and to me in particular, and what he did for our sport in general. I can mostly talk about him when it comes to Highland Games, which was his first passion, of course, as a true Scot. I met David over more than 20 years ago. They asked me the same question yesterday. When did you meet David? I mean, I met him in so many places, from Scotland to the mainland in Europe till in the States. Our path crossed so many times, but he was certainly the guy that guided me through Highland Games, gave me chances to become a professional athlete when he was still a part of the ISTF. And he showed me what Highland Games is all about. What I found one of the things he accomplished most is the preservation of the Highland Games in general throughout all the years. He brought back the real sport of Highland Games worldwide. He helped a lot of people and organizations with setting up games, preserving that Highland Games in general, and things like that. And that is something we will always remember David about. I met him the first time in Tomintown, which was at a Highland Games. Why do I still remember that? Because there was, it's like a funny story, but not a real funny story. I'm a left-handed thrower. That means when you do like a hammer throw in Scottish Highland Games and the hammer slips out of your hands, it goes out on the right, on the left side. Because I'm a left-handed thrower, most of the guys are right-handed throwers. So what happens most of the time, David was a referee and he stood on the left side of the cage. The hammer slipped out of my hands because it was raining and it hit the net. Of course, there was a safety net, but eventually it just almost hit David on the side, and that really shook me up. But he he came up to me and said, "These things can happen." I didn't listen really well. I didn't notice that you were a left-handed thrower, so he really calmed me down. After that, we had some good conversations. David came to Belgium 2 times when I organized the Belgium Championships. He helped me out with organizing. He gave me tips. He told me how to set up games and things like that. And for that, I will always be grateful. Like I told the beginning, he gave me chances. He told me what Highland Games is all about. But besides that, David did so many things, so many great things for the sport in general, for strongman, even for bodybuilding. People really should read his books. I mean, they're awesome. They're full of knowledge, full of history. Like I said, also in the beginning, there's not enough time to describe all the things that David did for all kinds of strength sports, and we will always be grateful and always be thankful, and may God rest his soul. Thank you, David.
Welcome in our gym in Holland. I'm Wout Zylstra, and this is a special photo for me, always. Mr. Webster, as a speaker, as an organizer with Douglas Edmonds. He invited me many times for a lot of Highland Game competition all over the world, and I'm very proud and thankful that I could compete with him. And once he helped me by a competition, organizing competition in Zwifterband, and he came over from Scotland, and we drive to Zwifterband, and he asked about Zwifterband, about the history. I told him 1950 it was sea, bottom of the sea, and then they took the water away and they built Zwifterband, and it's 6 to 7 meters below sea level, and he never expected that, and he called the whole competition. He said no Highland Games, he said Lowland Games. That was a very special thought. Thank you, Mr. Webster, for everything. You were the best, and a big promoter from the Highland Games. And this picture, this photo will always stay here.
David Webster, or as I usually say, Uncle David. I'm almost at a loss of words for the passing of such a great man, but I would like to say his legacy will live on forever. David was more than just a family friend and a magisterial, historian in the world of strength and Highland Games and strongman. He was a father, he was a husband, and most of all, for all of us in our perspective of strength sports, we would not be where we are today if it was not for David. And I think we all owe him some great gratitude and respect and rest to such a legend in the sport. David Webster, OBE, Order of the British Empire, is a true legend in the sport of Highland Games, the sport of strongman, and all the sports of strength. So we definitely have to pay homage to this man. But overall, he was a big character and a big pivotal person in the strength world as a whole. So rest in peace, David Webster.
I first met Mr. David Webster at the Worlds in 2017 in Holland. From being invited to compete in the David Webster World Championship for 6 years, I have been able to travel the world and meet some wonderful people. It was such an honor to meet Mr. David Webster, and I am pretty sure he will be missed by so many.
What a privilege it was to have known David Webster. He was truly an icon in strength sports and Highland Games in particular. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to be around him on a lot of occasions. I throw at his World Championships multiple times, listen to his fantastic stories. He truly left an impact on me and countless other athletes and strength sports in general. Godspeed, David.
Very saddened to hear of the recent passing of David Webster. He's done a huge amount for strength sports throughout the world. He obviously founded the Webster World Highland Games Championships, which my father, George Patience, won in 1994, and I've been very fortunate to compete in a number of times. Here's to David.
Unfortunately, I never had the pleasure of meeting David in person, but he is someone that I've admired from afar for many, many years. Very few people would truly understand the influence and impact that he's had over the world of strength, be it bodybuilding, strongman, Highland Games, or stone lifting. He has quite an unmatched legacy. that will go on for many, many years. His passion for knowledge and exploring the culture and the history and the stories behind strength sports really is unmatched, and is a massive inspiration for many people, including myself, who will do everything in his power to attempt to try and follow in a little bit of his footsteps and trying to spread the knowledge, the stories, the history of everything that is strength. He will be massively missed, but he will never be forgotten.
In October this year, we lost Mr. David Webster. Mr. Webster is a pillar of the strength community with just contributions far and wide. I think as a kid growing up, my entire trajectory in life would probably be much different had it not been for the contributions of Mr. Webster. He put on the very first strongman competition in 1955 that was televised. Myself growing up in the 80s and 90s, I watched a lot of World's Strongest Man. I got a chance to see guys like Bill Kazmaier and Jeff Capes and John Paul Sigmason, Magnus Ver Magnusson, Mariusz Pudzianowski. I saw these men on TV doing amazing things because of David Webster. In the Highland Games, we have a world championship because of Mr. Webster. The Webster Worlds is the world championship of Highland Games. It's been running strong since 1980. A lot of people are aware of the Denny Stones. The Denny Stones are, the measuring stick of strength to many people, to stone lifters especially. Well, we wouldn't have those had it not been for David Webster. They were lost after World War I, and he rediscovered them, found them in a river. One of them was quite damaged. He repaired the handle, pulled them out, and we've had them ever since. His contributions are immense. What he meant and what he did for the strength community is just astounding. And I just want to say you'll be sorely missed. And thank you very much for everything you did for us, Mr. Webster.
I never had the pleasure of meeting David Webster, but obviously I benefited from his hard work and his promotion of the Highland Games. I just want to say how eternally grateful I am to him, and I wish his family the best, and you all are in my prayers.
Well, it was sad news when I received the phone call that Dave Webster had passed away. I'd known Dave since the 80s, and I got to know Dave over the years, spent many time together, traveling to many countries, Brazil, New Zealand, America, Canada, and Europe. And just listening to the stories, it was just incredible. Dave used to come to California and spend 2 weeks a year in September. He would come and stay with us. We would travel to Pleasanton, games in Northern California, big games there. Then back to Southern California, and from there we would head to New Hampshire, another big games. And I look forward to that 2 weeks. It was just, I felt privileged to spend so much time and getting to know him and the stories and how he first got involved in the sport. It was at a young age. His father took him to a wrestling match, so the big strong wrestlers for the circus, and watching the circus strongmen and Highland Games. And this sparked his interest and a lifelong passion for strength and athletics. Dave was on the committee for the Commonwealth for many years, Commonwealth Games, several Olympic Games. He was one of the very first, back in the 80s, to invite international strongmen to come compete in his competitions in Scotland, and this paved the way for more competitions like that He put Strongman where it is today on the map. For had beginnings back in the 80s, taking on the greats such as Sigmarsson, Bell Kazmaier, Jeff Capes. That's a big names back then. It was competing in the games then, and the strength events that he held through the Scotland Great Games, Calendar, Aviemore, Parklands, many more. I felt privileged to know Dave, get to know him. He was a great man. Always talked about his family, his boys, and Leslie and Beatty, especially Beatty, and his grandchildren. And he made a big impact on Highland Games and strength sports, weightlifting, so much, so much. And but he will be remembered. His legacy he's left behind, and the many books he's written, many books, 30 plus books, maybe more, maybe 40 books or so he's written over his career, and so he's left great knowledge and great stories of the athletes of bygone days in the Highland Games and the strength world, and he will be missed. It was a privilege to know him, and he was a hero of mine.
David Webster, gone, never forgotten. Legends never die. Legend, icon, legacy. Thank you for all your contributions. I'm a talker. I could sit here and talk for hours about his contributions, his impact on the world of strength. That's something for if you're listening to just Google and just sit and read in amazement of how one man and his contributions have impacted the world of strength. There will never be another. Again, I could go on and on about his contributions. David, I was thankful for the time in your presence. I was thankful for your friendship. I was thankful for your generosity. I'm also thankful for all that you gave to the world of strength, not just Highland Games. Again, legends never die. Your legacy will live on forever, brother. Thank you for everything.
I wanted to do a short little clip in remembrance of David Webster and everything he's been a part of, especially all the strength sports that I'm currently a part of and participate in. He has been a big part, whether it's been an athlete, a promoter, a judge, ref, it doesn't matter. He has had his hands in everything. He was part of Strongman, getting it on TV. He helped get World Strongest Man together and get that televised. He was part of, helping Terry Todd get the Arnold Strongman Classic with the Strongman there. He has been a big part and, big pusher of the Scottish Highland Games internationally to get people to come back to Scotland and revive, stone lifting, caber tossing, all these things. He has been instrumental in everything, pushing it forward, getting people to be in strength culture altogether. He was one of the ones that got the Denny stones out of the river and got them back up for everyone to lift them. People travel from all over the world to lift the Denny stones. I was able to go this summer with Thomas. We both got to lift them at Denny Day. Really awesome to be part of that culture and that history. And, people come there and they recognize strength and they respect it. And I'm thankful for everything that he's pioneered forward, he has done throughout his entire life. And he will be missed. He was a historian. He was an athlete, he was a promoter, he was part of everything, and he was instrumental in a lot of the stuff that we do today, and we just want to thank him for everything that he has done, and he will be really missed.
I've known how important David Webster is to the games since I was a kid, and my dad was throwing as a professional. David is a key figure in the growth of the Highland Games, especially in the United States.
I had the pleasure of meeting David in Aberdeenshire, Scotland, after lifting the Denny stones. He was very generous with his time, and it was awesome to speak to. Possibly the most important thing David will be remembered for in our sport was as its historian. His work preserved decades of knowledge for future generations, a gift we will not be able to replace.
Thank you for everything, David Webster. You'll be missed.
I never got the privilege to meet David Webster, but he was so involved in multiple sports that I had several coaches and teammates throughout my athletic endeavors that did know David. So I knew of him for a long time, and hearing people talk about him always imparted such a sense of admiration and respect. It wasn't until I started getting more involved with the Highland Games that I really understood how much work that he had done. I love throwing. I love that I get to travel across the continent and spend time with others who love throwing as much as I do. Each time I meet the most wonderful, hardworking individuals who give so much back to our sport time and again. And I know that that culture would not exist without the influence and example of David Webster. He was so willing to work for not just the games, but pretty much all strength sports at the same time. And that passion is an inspiration to me and to so many others. I'm so grateful to David for furthering the games and creating such amazing opportunities and such a wonderful community that surrounds the games and all strength sports now because of him. It benefits countless athletes around the world, and I could never say enough for what he has done. Thank you, David.
Seems like the older I get and the longer I've been around the strength world, the more I see some of the greats pass away. And we lost one of the all-time greats, Mr. David Webster, very recently. And everybody should take a moment, if you're not familiar with who he is and his contributions to the sports, Strongman and Highland Games. You should look him up. I met him a few times. Can't say that I knew him well, but I did meet him, and whenever I did, he was always a classy individual and a very, very genuine human being. So, Sláinte, my friend. Rest easy.
Hey everybody, this is just a video to pay tribute to the late and great David Webster, one of the founders of strength sports. Now, I never got the privilege and honor to meet him, but knowing that his knowledge and his dedication and his legacy has been able to just absolutely pave the way for so many men and now women in both strength sports and Highland Games that we wouldn't have be able to make without him. So just a huge thank you to everything that he has done, and hopefully everything that we can do to continue the progress in not only Highland Games, stone lifting, but strength sports for everybody in this world.
I had the pleasure of meeting and hanging out with David at the Arnold Strongman and Arnold Sports Festival a few times, and always very, very interesting to hear about the old history of this iron game and of the athletics. So it was a real pleasure, and of course he was very inspirational in what he had to do.
The strength world mourns the loss of David Webster, a fantastic man whose passion for stone lifting and for strength in general has been nothing but inspiration for everybody involved. I know personally, as someone who has found or refound the Irish lifting stones over the past couple of years, that David's influence was heavily involved in that, especially in his refining of the Dinny stones. So I think anybody who lifts a lifting stone, be it in the Scottish or the Irish, any of the Gaelic cultures, will have David to thank for his involvement in bringing it back, especially, of course, with the Dinny stones. So I'd just like to thank him for that, and his memory, I think, will live on through these stones forever. So,
although I did have the pleasure of meeting David, I really never got to know David or fully grasp the impact that he's had on strength sports. But I'd just like to say thank you from all current, past, future stone lifters, Highland Games athletes, strength athletes of any kind. Without guys like you, David, none of this would be possible. You played such a pivotal role in the development of strength sports. Honestly, it's hard to put into words and to even understand the impact that you've had on people without them even knowing it in the different strength sports. So David, you'll be greatly missed. You will not be forgotten, and I'm just so grateful to have this opportunity that I do today because of the impact that you've had and everything that you've done for the strength community over the years. So David, thank you. God rest.
Among his many accolades, David was also a great entertainer when it came to the Highland Games. And in my 24 plus years of being involved in the Highland Games, I had the privilege of seeing David at work on the field, educating and entertaining the crowd. And if you've ever been on the field with David announcing, you know that he has a repertoire of jokes that he likes to tell the crowd. And one of my favorites was, if someone was doing really great in a hammer throw and they were approaching the cage for their next throw, he would say, you know, this man's a great athlete, but he could never hold down a construction job. Because when he was a young lad, his mother would say, if anyone ever puts a hammer in your hand, throw it as far as you can. And it always got a great reaction out of the crowd, and that's just one of the great memories I'll have of David Webster.
It is with great sadness that we've heard the passing of David Webster. David Webster was a curator of strength that we have today. Without David, we wouldn't have the famous Dinnie stones that he found back in 1950s. David is the reason why we have the friendships that we have today throughout the stone lifting community and throughout strength.
And we've got to be grateful for everything that David did for Strongman as well. That's now evolving across into Strongwoman, who's a massive part of World's Strongest Man, and the Arnold as well. So massive thanks to everything that David has done, and we are both sending all of our love and condolences to David's loved ones.
Hello everyone, we are New England Stones of Strength. I'm Jarrett and this is Steve. We never had the honor of meeting David Webster in person, but we have seen the fruits of his labors.
The fact that you engage in Highland Games or stone lifting is a reflection of the love that David Webster had for the history of Scottish strength culture.
Every single stone identified, lifted, and cataloged these days is a direct line to the work that David did in his life. We here at New England Stones of Strength are honored to carry a small portion of that weight forward into the future.
Thank you, David. Your contributions and the work that you've done will carry through with every weight thrown, stone lifted, and caber turned. Cheers.
Cheers.
Hi folks, I met David Webster twice when I was in my adolescent years. My coach at the time, Willie Robertson, had spoke about him at great length, had explained to me as like a young man how much he'd done for strength sports and the Highland Games as a whole, but you never appreciate these things when you're younger. And it's not until, you know, you're older and you actually appreciate the gravitas of the man and how much he's done for our sport as a whole. So all I can say is thank you.
First met him in 2012 at the Arnolds. Just a quick, brief conversation. I just wanted to introduce myself. I knew of him. He was a legend and I just wanted to meet him. 2015, I was lucky enough to get invited to the Webster Worlds Highland Games in Pleasanton. That's where I got to meet him and got to know him a little bit better. Each morning we used to have breakfast at the Black Bear, Steve Conway, Dave Webster and myself, and that's where the good conversations got started, I suppose. We had great breakfast. They had really good breakfast there, but the conversations were even better. And the stories that he told were unbelievable. He was a legend in the sport, and especially sports history. He was like an encyclopedia. But one of the stories that I remember was when he told me one of his good friends was the original Darth Vader, Dave Prowse. And when he said that, I was like, oh wow, now you're my friend for life. Star Wars was one of my favourite movies, and Darth Vader was my favourite character. So he was going to be friend for life now. You will be missed, Dave. But your legacy and legend will always exist and always be around. And us strength athletes, thank you for everything you've given to the sport. But you'll never be forgotten. Thank you.
I'm Dave Nisbet. And I'm Dale Nisbet, and we are hosts of the Stones of Strength podcast. And we are co-founders of the Edmonton Stones of Strength. We are, with a heavy heart, making this video to pay tribute to the life and legacy of the late, great David Webster.
Now, we didn't have the privilege or opportunity to meet David Webster, but we certainly found the echoes of his legacy, and it's had a huge impact on our life. Last year, we had the opportunity to go to Scotland, and I managed to lift the Dinnie stones, and then we toured around the country and lifted a bunch of the historical stones there, and stone lifting and the culture that comes with it has become a huge, huge part of our lives.
Through David Webster's efforts to go and find and revive and restore the Dinnie stones, he created an opportunity to lift these strength relics for not only the hundreds of people that have lifted them to date, but also for the thousands of people that will lift them into the future. And also in doing so, he inspired many, many other people in Scotland, as well as other countries around the world, to seek out to try to find and revive lost or nearly lost historical stones of strength. And in doing so, revive their local and really the global stone lifting community. And for that, we are all very greatly indebted to David.
We don't have historical stones here in Edmonton, Alberta, and Canada, but we've started our own local strength circuit of stones, and this one right here is the Webster stone. We wanted to honor him and his legacy by naming the stone after him. It's a 335-pound stone. We will be having a plaque put up here. It's in the process of being made, and we just thank you for everything you've done for us and the stone lifting community, David.
Yeah.
Through the compilation of this tribute video, we get a taste of just how important and influential Mr. David Webster, OBE, was to the strength community globally. Sadly, I am one of those people who never got a chance to meet him in person, although I greatly wanted to and have been massively influenced by everything he's done, particularly in the Highland Games. I feel that as a community, it's very important for us to give back to those who have given to us, to honor our lineage, our ancestors, to honor where we come from, no matter where we come from, and particularly to give respect and some homage to those great giants upon whose shoulders this generation stands. Mr. Webster is definitely one of the great giants of this modern era, and his legacy is going to live on for generations to come. So Mr. Webster, thank you very, very much for everything you've done for us, and may you rest in peace and in power.